They say every mistake has a cost. But what if one error could burn through billions of dollars in a matter of seconds? This is the story of how a single decision, made in a quiet office in Tokyo, became the most expensive mistake in history, one that still haunts the financial world to this day. It was December 8, 2005. The Japanese stock market was bustling as usual, humming with the clicks of keyboards and the chatter of brokers. At Mizuho Securities, one of the country's largest investment banks, a new trader was preparing to execute a major transaction for a client. The order was simple: sell one share of a small recruiting company called JCOM Co. at 610,000 yen, roughly $5,000 at the time. It was a routine job, until the trader's fingers hit the wrong keys. Instead of entering one share for 610,000 yen, he entered 610,000 shares for 1 yen each. To anyone unfamiliar with the stock market, this might not sound catastrophic, but here's the problem. JCOM's entire share count was only 14,500 shares. This trader had just offered to sell more than 40 times the number of shares that even existed, and at the price of a single yen each, about a cent. The market went wild. Buyers swarmed like sharks, smelling blood in the water. Within minutes, investors around the world were grabbing these practically free shares, knowing they were worth thousands of times more. Inside Mizuho Securities, panic erupted. Phone calls were flying. Screens were flashing red. The trader who made the mistake reportedly went pale, his hands shaking as he realized what he had just done. But the worst part, the Tokyo Stock Exchange's system wouldn't let them cancel the order. Every single one of those 610,000 shares was being processed. By the time it was over, Mizuho had essentially given away millions of dollars worth of stock for pennies. When the dust settled, the loss was $225 million in a single day. It was the largest trading error in history at that time. The fallout was brutal. Mizuho's reputation was shredded. The Tokyo Stock Exchange was criticized for not having safeguards in place. Executives resigned. Lawsuits followed. And the young trader, he was never publicly named, but insiders say he never recovered from the humiliation. The lesson was clear. In the high-stakes world of finance, one tiny slip of the finger can trigger a disaster of historic proportions. A mistake worth $250 million, all because of a single misplaced keystroke. And yet, the story doesn't end there. A few years later, another fat finger trade, this time in Europe, would briefly surpass Mizuho's record, costing billions. In market chaos, it proved one thing: human error is timeless, and in the wrong place, at the wrong time. It can be the most expensive thing in the world. If you found this story fascinating, imagine what other billion-dollar blunders are hiding in history, just waiting for their turn in the spotlight. Asterisk. When the report finally landed on Jonathan Price's mahogany desk in the penthouse boardroom of Morgan Brooks International, the room went silent. No one spoke. No one breathed. The pages trembled slightly in his hands, not from the draft that came in through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, but from the weight of what they revealed. A single decimal point, a single misplaced dot in an oil futures contract, had just cost the company $6.4 billion overnight. The error hadn't been caught by the junior analyst who prepared the report, nor by the 3 managers who signed off on it. It slipped past the automated trading systems, past the compliance team, past the final audit, and by the time the sun rose over the financial district, it had triggered a chain reaction that tanked global oil prices and sent competitors into a frenzy. The call came from Zurich first, then Tokyo, then Riyadh. Clients who had been partners for decades suddenly demanded explanations, and in the background, shadowy rivals smelling blood began shorting the company's stock, accelerating its fall. But the real twist, when the investigation began, it became clear that the mistake wasn't a mistake at all. The decimal point had been moved deliberately. And the trail led not to some low-level employee, but to a man who had been at the heart of the company for 20 years, Jonathan's oldest friend, and the one person he trusted without question. And this betrayal wasn't just about money. It was about revenge, the kind that had been simmering for more than a decade. Jonathan's mind raced. 20 years of boardroom battles, late-night strategy calls, and private toasts over victories. They all replayed in his head like an old film reel. And now, every memory felt poisoned. The internal security team's report lay on the table, printed in bold, cold letters. Primary suspect, Robert Kane, chief financial strategist. Robert wasn't just a colleague. He was the man who'd stood by Jonathan when his marriage fell apart. The man who had vouched for him when the board was ready to replace him. The man who shared whispered conversations about the company's future over half-finished glasses of scotch. And now, Robert was gone. His office was empty, his phone disconnected, his accounts wiped clean. Jonathan stared out the window at the city skyline, the glass towers shimmering like blades. Somewhere out there, Robert was moving, calculating his next step, while billions hung in the balance. The official narrative for the media was simple, an accounting error. But Jonathan knew better. This was no accident. Robert had spent months, maybe years, positioning himself for this. But why? The answer arrived in the form of an encrypted email from an unknown sender. It contained only a single attachment, a photograph. In it, Jonathan was younger, smiling at a charity gala. Beside him stood Robert's younger brother, Anthony Kane, a rising star in finance at the time. Anthony had died mysteriously in a failed investment deal years ago, an incident Jonathan had been indirectly linked to, though the details were buried deep in corporate archives. And now, Jonathan understood. This wasn't about money. This was blood debt.